What is power training? Today I want to talk to you what is power and the definition of power, what is power training, and what are the different modes, efforts and intensity we need to consider when we train for power. So what is power training? Before we start talking about power training, we need to define what power is. In physics, power can be defined as the product of force multiplied by velocity. Therefore, a definition of power could be: power is the ability to exert the highest amount of force in the shortest period of time. If we're looking at sporting actions, very rarely we have a lot of time to apply force. So if we're looking at strength training, for an example, many times when we see people doing their maximum lifts, you will see, let's say if it is bench press, for example, or a squat, we can see it takes quite a few seconds to complete the movement. In sport we don't have that time, so we have milliseconds to produce as much force as we possibly can. And that is a good example of power. So power is the ability in that short time frame, 100 milliseconds, 200 milliseconds, to apply the highest amount of force as possible. When we are talking about power training, we have to consider different training modes in order to do our power training. These training modes could be body weight, an external resistance such as a bar or a dumbbell or a kettlebell, medicine balls. So we have different training modes to train power. It is also important to understand that we have different efforts when we train power. So basically we can distinguish between three efforts. One is a dynamic effort, one is a ballistic effort, and one is a plyometric effort. Let's start with a ballistic effort. A ballistic effort is basically where we're doing an activity where in the end the object, it might be the body or the body weight plus external weight, goes into a free flight. So an example would be having a bar on your back, squatting down, jumping up. That would be a ballistic effort. A dynamic effort, on the other hand, is where we try to do the concentric movement. So we go down, this is the eccentric movement. Once we go up, that's called the concentric movement, that we do the concentric movement with the highest effort possible and as fast as possible. The plyometric effort is an effort, and we talk about that later when we speak about plyometrics, is basically we can distinguish between lower body and upper body, but if we're talking about lower body, we're talking very much about the contact time on the ground. So we're getting over a hurdle, we jump down off an object, we try to minimize the contact time and get up. What that effort has is a so-called stretch shortening cycle, so it's a bit special. So as a recap, we have a dynamic effort, which is the concentric movement, the coming up, as explosive as possible. We have a ballistic effort, which is where we do the concentric movement and go into a free flight. And we have the plyometric effort, where we're looking at short contact time and using the stretch shortening cycle in the body or in the muscles. So now after we have defined the efforts, we need to define the intensity. For a plyometric effort, the external resistance is very low. So we're talking about body weight or body weight maybe with a little bit of extra resistance. So we're talking about 10 to maximum 20% of the 1 RM. For the ballistic effort, we talk about intensities of 20 to 50% of the 1 RM. And for the dynamic effort, we will use intensities of 50 to 70% of the 1 RM. Yeah? It's also important here that these numbers are not written in stone. They are a bit flexible, but it's a good guideline. And the last thing, if we talk about repetitions, we need to bear in mind, if we want to work on power, we're using the energy system, the phosphagen energy system, which gives us high amounts of energy for a short period of time. Short period of time means 6 to 10 seconds. So our efforts should be completed within 6 to 10 seconds. Having that in mind, we need to think how many repetitions can we do in 6 to 10 seconds, and that dictates the number of repetitions we can do. So from practical field, we're talking about 2 to 3, maximum 5 to 6 repetitions, but more on the lower end. I hope the information was useful, and see you soon.